Well, it's good to see you, Daniel. I'm here with Daniel Gospodarek. Is that right?
Yeah, Gospodarek. Yep.
Gospodarek, uh, licensed clinical social worker working in Kenosha, Wisconsin, which is the southeast portion of Wisconsin, but sees
Mhm.
clients virtually all throughout Wisconsin and virtually in Colorado as well, where you
Correct.
were previously working. And you're the owner of Revitalize Mental Health. Uh,
Hmm.
and I know you have a very particular kind of client base and some specialties that are really unique, especially in this area.
Hmm.
So I wanted to have you on just to give people that are watching a better sense of kind of who you are and what you work with and the kinds of clients that you support. Because I think you're a great clinician in this area, and you're one of the people that really specializes in working with like men's mental health, traumatic
Hmm.
brain injuries, and things like that. So if you want, you give yourself just a little introduction and just kind of overview of kind of who you are and where you come from.
Yeah, for sure. So, well, thank you. Thank you for having me on too, Jacob. I appreciate the space to share and kind of go through my practice, but as well as work through the ACT matrix later on. Um, as ACT is a vital component to some people's forms of therapy. So originally grew up in Wisconsin, Manitowoc, Green Bay area, and we moved to Colorado, and that's where we had been living the past few years. So now moved back, and that's why I'm dually licensed. But essentially created Revitalized Mental Health because I saw that there was a need in the community for folks seeking therapy that was also effective, right? So matching the people's needs with also helping to bring healing into their lives and how they see fit. As of late, I've really been kind of funneling down and only working with men's mental health, traumatic brain injuries, um, and partially due because I have a traumatic brain injury, right? So
Mm,
then, I've walked similar similar, not maybe not the same recovery process as other folks who've had a traumatic brain injury, but having one and having to go through all the different pieces to the recovery from surgery to speech to, just watching out for my head.
mm,
Um,
mhm,
is an important part, and then also tailoring that there's a lot of pieces that men sometimes maybe miss unintentionally and or maybe just kind of white knuckle and don't even pay attention to, in terms of suppressed emotions, high functioning depression or carrying the lasting effects of childhood trauma into their current relationships and their relationships with their children, right? And starting
mhm.
to uncouple some of those different pieces that kind of that kind of keep people stuck, or just these patterns seem to repeat over and over and people are like, why is that even happening?
Yeah, and
So
tell me a little bit about like well, at least from my perspective, what I've noticed is there's been a big spotlight on men's mental health maybe over the past like 10 years or so, where it's really
Mhm.
become more mainstream. Everybody's trying to reduce that stigma
Yeah,
around seeking out therapy.
sure.
And I just want to see kind of what your experience has been regarding those kinds of issues, stigma, people feeling like, do I want to see a therapist? Is
Hmm.
this the thing that I need to be doing, or is this just bogus, whatever? How have you approached that?
Yeah, I think what I've seen is that people come to therapy for a variety of reasons. Sometimes it's because their significant other is like, this is a last draw, like go.
Hmm.
Other times it might be even court mandated, right? Uh,
Hmm.
but then there are some times where people are like, I've already been to all these different providers and it hasn't helped. So I'm just want to see if this can do anything, right? It's
Hmm.
almost like that last go. Or sometimes I've seen with younger generations, people in their early 20s and 30s having some awareness around like, yeah, I've known I need to go to therapy for a while. I just haven't had the time or the money or both, right?
Hmm.
Uh, So I think some of those aspects to men seeking therapy or asking for help is it's slowly shifting, right? But it takes
Hmm.
time to change societal stigmas, and especially too because we need to honor that there's a part of that not asking for help has an element of grit in it.
Hmm.
And we often need grit in our lives to push through the discomfort, push through the long work hours or the overtime that we need to provide for our family. And balancing that it's okay to have grit and say, hey, I need to back off for a second to take care of myself, right? And
Yeah,
go back and forth.
100%. And even, yeah, as you're saying that, I'm conceptualizing it a little bit like like you said, society, maybe we're conditioned in a certain way, especially men, to try to take care of everything
Mhm.
or be strong and resilient, and that means not showing any weakness, maybe.
Hmm.
But I'm also thinking about it in terms of like I think men are willing and interested in using tools that are at their disposal to
Sure.
accomplish those things, taking care of their family, taking care of themselves.
Yeah.
And I think in the therapy world, until recently, we have not made that so easy to seek
Hmm.
out those tools or to visiting a website looking for a therapist.
Yep.
We're seeing these things that maybe aren't appealing too much to those
Mhm.
demographics until recently.
Right.
And so I know you're doing a great job of trying to market directly towards those demographics.
Yeah, I think the marketing piece is is a part of it. Word of mouth is another good part, especially once people know that. And I'm not saying that I'm the only effective therapist. There are
Hmm.
many effective therapists, right? But connecting with the right therapist, and if it's not the right therapist, also being okay to say, yeah, I don't really mesh with this person. I'm gonna keep looking, or can you refer me to somebody else, right? It's
Hmm.
your treatment, it's your therapy. It's not theirs, right? So it's in your control to say no more. Or maybe it is working and you're like, yeah, let's keep going, right?
Hmm. 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 Yeah, because I always take this approach of like clients come to us, maybe they don't have much of a background in therapy itself. They've only
Mhm.
seen it on TV and movies and things like that,
Mhm.
which is not really how it works in real life. So when they're coming into us, we have to sort of set up those expectations and the context of therapy itself and say, here's what it
Right.
is, here's what it looks like. And you have that freedom to choose and seek out the therapist that is the right fit for you.
Yeah, I mean to seek them out, right? As well. I had another thought pop into my head around not all like every therapist has a different style, right?
Hmm.
Different approach and different training, right?
Hmm.
So if you're going to find a therapist that, because of childhood trauma, working with somebody that does not specialize in that or isn't aware or has worked in some of those elements may not be the most effective use of time and resources.
Exactly, right. And I think that's another thing that maybe the lay person, the average person just seeking therapy for the first time may not
Mhm.
really realize or understand that there are different styles of therapy, different training that is available, and different approaches or modalities that that we
Mhm.
know very well. But it's
Mhm.
hard for the average person to distinguish between those, right? Like, what is the
Yep.
difference between this one and that one? And so making that easier is always going to be helpful for the client seeking the
Mhm.
therapist.
Definitely, and most therapists, I know myself included, I believe you and your team also do the free 15-20 minute
Oh yeah.
consultation calls, right? And to really, I'm going to encourage listeners or people seeking therapy to use those, right? Because that is your time to ask those pertinent questions. What is your training? What is your experience with XYZ,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? Can you actually help me? Have you seen it help before, with other people? And use that free kind of meeting to say, yes, I want to explore a first session, or no, you're not going to be the right fit, right?
Hmm. And I love it too when I do those free consultations when a client asks me a question that I'm not prepared for, right? Because like we have a sort of a little script in our own heads going into that call. When a client
Yeah,
asks you a really genuine question that it's like, oops, this is not what I was expecting.
right.
That's a really beautiful moment there to kind of add more of yourself and give them a real
Hmm.
perspective of what they're
Hmm.
getting into when it comes to
Yeah.
therapy.
Yeah, I mean, and then that's also a time to like to see not only like can they help you, but do you connect? Because that do you connect with a therapist? Because that's the other part of it is like the connection and the relationship that's formed
Hmm.
holds a significant components to the healing process in terms of attachment and of in terms of attunement, right? And if you're not picking up on that, or if it's maybe not to like not Jake, not to like push on like, is it too scripted, right? Because
Yeah.
sometimes therapists become robotic, right? They
Yeah.
get burnt out. It's a job, and to find like, can you actually connect on a human level with this person, right? Because most likely you are seeking therapy to work on something that is probably is going to open some more vulnerable aspects to your life, right?
Hmm.
And those pieces need to be treated with care and compassion and empathy, as well as, we need to keep that grit in there, right? To keep moving
Hmm.
forward.
Yeah, and maybe we can jump off into like the training that you were talking about earlier, because I know
Mhm.
every therapist out there, sort of says I'm evidence-based. I use evidence-based methods, but
Mhm.
you really walk the walk, and I know you've got specialized training in a lot of these different areas. So can you speak a little bit more towards your training and the types of therapy that you do?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm as we'll kind of get into later in this podcast, train and act. I really enjoy the dynamic and the that dynamic's not the right word, the fluidity of act
Hmm.
and how dynamic it can be to many different situations and its applicability. And the research there is also beautiful to when people get a chance to look at it, that it is beneficial in helping to, you know, create some space between painful thoughts or emotions or identify values and the behaviors and actions that get in the way of some of those things. And then also finding this ability to flex to situations, right? Some situations will be more intense, some will be maybe even a little more lackadaisy or a little let loose, right? And it's okay to be loose in those situations too, but then we just kind of have this natural ebb and flow. Um, so I use a lot of ACT, and then the two primary modalities that I use to really help heal trauma, PTSD is or are eye movement desensitization and reprocessing therapy, EMDR, and then somatic experiencing therapy, so SE for short.
Yeah.
Uh, those are those are both body up or bottom up forms of therapy, so they really start regulating the nervous system, healing the body, the nervous system, and then allowing those kinds of powerful healing effects to start moving into our cognitions, right? So people don't have such harsh negative thought patterns or critical talk, or the poor self-esteem starts
Mm-hmm.
to shift.
And those somatic approaches, right? They're really important because it shifts the therapeutic process from one of just talking, just regular kind of talk therapy, into
Hmm.
one that is more body focused, where we can kind of move our bodies or do things with our bodies in different ways.
Correct.
Um, Tell me a little bit more about kind of why that's important. Just not just using the words, but connecting with the body and in those approaches.
For sure. So one of the reasons EMDR and SE that I really enjoy working with them so much is because our world moves so fast. I mean, we're, even from an early age at school, maybe after school, extracurricular activities, sports, band practice, whatever. And then and then you sleep and you repeat and you do it all over again. And over time right, there's just this natural disconnection that happens between our brains and our body, and we forget to listen to our body even though it holds so much wisdom. And there are so many beautiful pieces that the body can communicate to us that maybe we either lose contact with, or we just suppress over time because maybe it hurts because it's childhood trauma, right? Or
Mm,
whatever it might be. Um, but bringing those back into alignment can really, again, start to shift the mental health symptoms we experience, can also help us give meaning to some of these experiences, not in terms of meaning like our body thinks on its own. It doesn't have a brain. We have the brain right
Mm,
together, but we cognitively can now notice somatic or body sensations and start tracking them so that they don't cause all this internal turmoil that is often there because of that disconnection.
hmm. Yeah, so it's a really sort of more holistic approach, incorporating the body and the mind, talking and some of the more of these kind of physical exercises into
Mm.
the therapeutic framework. It's really a neat approach, and it's something that people should try. If maybe they're working with somebody or they have done therapy in the past and they felt like something's just a little bit missing, or I wish we
Hmm.
focused on this a little bit more in terms of my body and my sensations.
Yeah,
It's an approach that I would recommend people seeking out.
for sure, for sure. It definitely it can definitely penetrate deeper than general talk therapies. And that is just because of the different layers of brains, the different areas of the brain, right, that we have. And, when we start healing from the body up, it's starting to shift things from the brainstem to the limbic system all the way up to the cerebral cortex versus cerebral cortex down.
Mm-hmm, hmm.
So we don't get in our own way in terms of our head. Right?
Yeah, it's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
I'm curious too about like the future of psychotherapy. There's so many changes technologically and this and that. What do you think the future of psychotherapy is going to look like? Let's say even
Mm.
10, 15, 20 years from now.
That's a big question. I think there's we're already seeing, I think, some of the advances about using more of the brain scans to really target
Mm,
certain regions with therapy. And I'm curious to see, how does that become more accessible for people that maybe need it, not just people who can afford it. Um, I think we saw a big leap in terms of psychotherapy accessibility during COVID,
hmm.
with the push to online services. And I think my hope and my opinion is that it's probably here to stay.
Sure.
Just given that people don't need to commute an hour anymore through, you know, traffic after a long day of work. They can just sit on their phone or something and connect with a quality therapist. So I think we saw a big leap with that. I'm really curious to see where some of these things will go with the brain scans. Excuse me, also some of the psychedelic work. I'm not
Yeah.
too familiar with it. Um, but I will be curious to see how that kind of shapes and forms in the years to come in further research. Also, as some of the first people who are doing psychedelic therapy or ketamine therapy right after they're getting a few years out, we're also collecting longevity data, right?
Hmm.
Are these changes sustained? Are they not?
Hmm.
So all those pieces will influence the research coming out.
Yeah, I'm excited about that too. I haven't done too much work or research into that, but I know that the ketamine therapy and psychedelics are really kind of in vogue right now, all around
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
country.
and it'll be interesting to see like what stays, what falls away,
Yeah,
right? What does research say? Also, what does insurance approve for quality of services
for
and
sure.
accessibility? So a
A lot
lot.
of this, a lot of kind of our conversation here is about this idea that in the beginning, just the way that science works and the scientific method works is like these new approaches always seem promising, sort of in the
Mhm.
beginning. And then
Right.
as they gain popularity and there's more research done on like how does it actually work, where does it work, and where does it not work, then it kind of evens or balances out, right? There's sort of like a hype cycle around certain
Sure.
things, and then it kind of evens out,
Definitely.
and they are beneficial and useful. We just want to see exactly how and when and
Right.
where, right?
Yes, and what are the aspects that are actually creating the change, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know that is something that EMDR I'm hoping. be targeting because we know EMDR works. They're just trying to decipher what is that aspect of it that is creating the most change, right? Is
Yeah,
it
for
the
sure.
eye movements or the tapping or is it the, the resourcing that takes place in the earlier stages?
Mm,
So really honing it in so we know, right? Because then when we know, we can also focus on it. We can also create other forms of therapy that are maybe different or modified, right? Whatever it may be.
hmm. It's wonderful. Okay,
Hmm.
well, good. Well, I'm wondering if you'd be willing to kind of do an act matrix with me. It's something that I do with a lot of the people that I have on
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
show.
Sure.
And I
Let's jump
remember
on it.
when you and I were talking the other day, I remember you saying you weren't quite familiar with the Act Matrix, right? You sort of
Hmm.
know of it, but you haven't really done one you don't use it in your work
Yeah.
specifically. And I love doing the Matrix for the first time with new people. Uh,
Hmm.
when I work with individuals, this is usually what I do on the first session, the intake session.
Okay.
I'll do a matrix with them towards the end, and it gives me so much information about them as a person and what we're actually working on beyond just their sort of top level description of
Hmm.
what they think their experience is. It gives us like another layer to work with.
Okay.
So I want to lead you through it, and it's really simple. Um, I'm going to draw a horizontal line with an arrow on each end, just like
Hmm.
that. And I'm going to on one end of the arrow, I'm going to put the letter T. The other side, I'll put the letter A. The letter T is going to stand for the word toward, like moving toward something. And the letter A is going to stand for the word away, like moving away from something. And so, what I want you to do is, if you can just imagine in your mind, or just picture a rabbit or what a rabbit does, you can probably imagine that there are certain things that a rabbit wants to move toward or gets close or get closer to, and then there are certain things that a rabbit would want to move away from. So
Hmm.
let's use that as an example first before we dive into this system. In
Hmm.
real life, what are things that a rabbit might want to move toward or get closer to?
Food or shelter.
Yeah, for sure. What about away from? What are some things that a rabbit would want to get away from?
Predators.
Easy, right? So it's a really simple concept.
Hmm.
Rabbits want to move toward things that they want more of. They want to move away from things that they want less of. Well, it turns out that you and me and everybody you know are a lot like rabbits. We also want to move toward things that we want more of and away from things that we
Hmm.
want less of, things that might be dangerous or harmful to us, and so forth. The only real difference between us and a rabbit is we have like a tiny bit of a bigger brain than a rabbit does. In fact, you were talking about the brain earlier. It's funny because a rabbit's brain is completely smooth. There's no wrinkles at all.
Mm.
They don't have that complex cerebrum that we do, and they our brain is folded because our heads are too small to support a bigger brain that could fit in there. So it's been folded up and compressed, so it looks all
Hmm.
wrinkly. Rabbits don't have that. They don't need it. So with that extra brain capacity and all those different like levels to it, it brings to us as human beings what I like to think of as two different worlds that we inhabit at the same time.
Hmm.
We have this external physical world that we inhabit, and then we also have this internal world, which is all of our thoughts and feelings and memories that show up inside of us. Okay.
Hmm.
So I'm going to put another line straight down the center here so that we have like four boxes. And that will roughly just indicate that distinction between the outer world and the inner world. But we're
Hmm.
not going to be too strict about that. But basically, just to kind of hammer this in a little bit more, this a rabbit only has that exterior existence. In other words, if you were to show a picture on your phone of a carrot to a rabbit, it's not going to care about that at all. It's not real to it.
Hmm.
If you showed a video of a wolf or something to a rabbit, yeah, it might run away for a second. But as soon as it realizes it's not real, it's fine again. But you and I, because we're human beings, we can see a picture or get a text message or something can
Hmm.
happen to us. and we can kind of get hung up on it all day long. Or a week later, we can still be thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
Or 20 years later, we can still be impacted by that thing that we saw just one time, right? And so that's that difference that I was kind of talking about, where we
Mm-hmm.
have this kind of very developed internal world that feeds back into that physical
Mm-hmm.
world back and forth. So with these four quadrants here, I'm going to ask you one question for each
Okay.
box, and then I'm just going to bullet point it. So you're just going to answer it, with a handful of responses, and I'll write them down for you in this matrix.
Yeah.
So we'll start down here in the bottom right-hand quadrant. For this quadrant, the question is, in your life or professionally, who and what are important to you? Who and
Mm.
what are important to you as a person?
Yeah, so spirituality,
Mm, yeah,
um, family,
good.
health.
Excellent. What else?
I think like thinking a little bit further outside of like immediate family, just like connections to friends and family,
Yeah, definitely.
or just connection.
Connections to people.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. Okay. Anything else you can think of to throw in there?
Mm-hmm. I think that's pretty good.
Great. And so look at this list, right? It may seem kind of simple on the surface, but it's actually extremely complex. Like you and I could sit here and have a discussion all day about spirituality and sort of what it means to you in your life and your thoughts
Mm-hmm.
about it. We could talk, for hours about your family and your health and these connections that you've built up that you find valuable in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And so each of these things is sort of a deep well of information. There's basically no bottom to it. You can always go back and talk more about your spirituality and your family and your health. These are things you're not ever going to get bored of, right? Talking
Mm-hmm.
about. Wonderful. So let's go over here to this box, one over to the left. For this box, the question is, what are some of the things that can show up on the inside of you, like thoughts, feelings, and memories that can get in the way of who and what are important to you? Right.
Mm.
So what shows up on the inside that can get in the way of who and what are important to you?
Yeah, so you could do like urges to eat like sweets or
Ooh, that's a
junk
great
food.
one. Yeah.
Right?
Sweets and junk food.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great one. Okay. What else shows up on the inside that
Like
can get in the way?
that kind of, it's hard to describe, but that off feeling that you get when you are kind of living outside of your values, that dissonance.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, kind of like a sensation and emotion,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Tell me, too, let's throw in some thoughts in here, right? So when that's showing up or some of these other feelings, what are some of the thoughts that come into your mind also?
A lot of should statements.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
So a ton of shoulds. You should do this, you should do that, or this isn't the way it should be,
Mm-hmm.
things like that.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Anything else that you can think of that would fit in this box?
Hmm. I think almost like you could put like a avoidance,
Sure.
right? Just like staying busy to avoid doing other things.
Yeah. Wonderful. That might show up later too in one of our other boxes here. In
Mm-hmm.
fact, we can kind of go up here. We're going to go straight up here because these two boxes are connected. So we're going up to the top left.
Mm-hmm.
For this box, the question is, when you are under the influence of some of these things down here that we just described, or really hooked by them or wrapped up in them, that urge to
Mm-hmm.
eat or that dissonance, just feeling like not connected to your values, all those
Mm-hmm.
should statements, or that kind of a urge to avoid. When you're really under the influence of those things, what do you tend to do in the outer world? So, what do you tend to do behaviorally when you're
Yeah.
really under the influence of those things?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think?
Sure. So sometimes like a decrease in productivity
Oh,
when
yeah.
you're kind of noticing that dissonance when you're noticing some of that should, right?
Hmm.
Because it's almost like a paralyze, right? Of like, oh, there's so much to do. I'm just not going to do anything because I'm overwhelmed.
Yeah. Too
Um,
much choice or too much like analysis
yeah,
paralysis,
yeah,
we
for
can
sure.
say.
Um, I mean, the urges to eat sweets, right, would be eating them
Uh-huh. So
or
not watching your diet or not watching your health, just
yeah,
kind of just consuming just to consume.
yeah, not working out, stuff like that, not staying active.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So I'm just gonna. I know our handwriting is bad. I'm putting in here eating mindlessly instead of mindfully, right? Uh,
Yes.
not focusing on your health as much. Wonderful.
Hmm.
Okay,
Hmm.
so now I'm gonna swing some of this down. Like, let's say that after you do some of these things appear, where your
Hmm.
productivity is decreased, you're kind of frozen by too much things going on at once. You're paralyzed. You're not
Hmm.
taking care of your health or your body. After those things happen, what shows up on the inside for you in terms of thoughts or feelings?
So sorry, so say that
After
one more
after
time.
those things happen, what shows
Hmm.
up on the inside for you in terms of thoughts or feelings?
Yeah, I mean, it usually is, like a nasty spiral between those that horizontal axis, right? It just kind of is like or a vicious spiral downward.
Sure.
And
Right. So do some of these things get worse? Have you noticed like
hmm
those should statements or some of those other things? They get
yeah, I think
stronger.
I think some of those urges, some of those internal experiences become a little more a little stronger, like you said, and then it kind of feeds different things that show up or more of the same that showed up.
Yeah. Wonderful. So you've noticed that spiral here, right? And that's just kind of what these arrows are
Hmm.
indicating, that we can kind of get hooked into a loop, a feedback loop where there's stuff is showing up on the inside of us. It's sort of influencing our behavior. And then our behavior externally is influencing what's going on inside us,
Hmm.
back and forth like this. That seemed
Right.
familiar to you.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's familiar to me as well. So congratulations. This only happens because you're a human being.
Ah,
That
great.
that rabbit we talked about earlier, it does not
Hmm.
get caught up in loops like this, right?
Mm.
It can get a close call, like rabbits are prey animals. Some cat or a coyote or even a raccoon or something like that, a hawk,
Hmm.
might try to eat a rabbit, and maybe the rabbit escapes just by the skin of its teeth, right? And
Hmm.
then it's back in its burrow, and then a few minutes later, it's fine again. It's not thinking about that close call it had last week or a
Yeah.
year ago, right? Where you and me, if we get into a close call like that, even once we're back into our safe environment, we might still be
Hmm.
kind of racked with that, going over it again and again and again in our heads. How could I have let this happen? What could I have done
Hmm.
differently? How can I make sure this never happens to me again? And so forth, right? And you've seen that. And I know your clients have seen it too.
Hmm. Yeah, it's a powerful spiral to be in, to experience and to sit in, and then also very helpless sometimes too.
Yeah, you just feel so stuck. And it's just like there's no way out, it feels like. Uh,
Hmm.
okay, great. So, what I'm going to do is let's go over here to the top right quadrant, the last box.
Hmm.
And so, for this quadrant, the question is, what are some things that you could be seen doing, like actual actions that you can take that would
Yeah.
move you in the direction of the people and things that you care about?
Mm.
What do you think?
Yeah. I think decreasing procrastination.
Oh, okay. Decreasing procrastination.
Yeah. Probably decreasing my caffeine intake as well.
Ah,
And then increasing some of like that more physical activity.
yeah, increasing
Hmm.
physical activity. All right. So I know you're an ACT guy too, at least part of the time. Let's take a look at some of these top two: decreasing procrastination and decreasing caffeine intake. Um, Here's how we kind of look at that too, sometimes from an ACT perspective, which is we don't want to set as a goal for ourselves something that a dead person can do better than a living person. So a
Mm-hmm.
dead person can decrease procrastination all the way down to zero, and a
Mm-hmm.
dead person can decrease caffeine intake all the way down to zero, right? So anytime a dead person can do it better than you can as a living person, we want to kind of modify that goal a little bit. We
Sure.
can just kind of flip it or change the wording slightly
Mm-hmm.
so that it's something that you're actually capable of doing as a living person. So might we modify some of those?
Mm. Like you could turn the decrease into like complete tasks when needed.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense, right? So chunking down your tasks, or there's many
Is
steps in that, right?
yeah, yeah,
Organizing.
yeah. Is that what you were talking about?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Like, because you think about it this way, a dead person can always decrease. So anytime we're talking about
Mm-hmm.
reducing or decreasing, dead people got that covered. But us living people, we're really good
Mm-hmm.
at increasing things or doing more of something, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so when we're talking about decreasing procrastination is one side of the coin. The other side of the coin might be becoming more organized or creating a calendar that fits my thinking style or doing this or that, right?
Yeah.
Which will increase my ability to focus on certain tasks or whatever it is. Does that make
Mm-hmm.
sense?
Mm-hmm.
I'm just giving you a hard time because you're also a therapist.
Yeah,
I
no,
wouldn't go
for
this hard
sure.
on a client, but
For
just something to
sure.
think about,
Mm-hmm.
right? So we can kind of convert those in some way, in the future here.
Yeah.
So let's take a look at this though. I see something is curious to me. Let's say, let me get a different color here. Let's say that you are able to increase organization, increase your ability to like maybe managing the caffeine intake,
Mm-hmm.
only doing it in certain times a day or certain occasions or whatever. Right? A dead
Yeah.
person can't do that. They can't choose which time they're going to drink the caffeine.
Right.
They can only choose not to drink the caffeine. But let's say that we've got that. We're talking about procrastination or increasing productivity in some way, or just managing your life in a different way,
Mm-hmm.
increasing things that are health habits for your life, increasing physical activity. So if we think about those three here, they I can see how they clearly tap into health and this kind of health value that is really
Mm-hmm.
important to you. But I don't see much that can tap into some of these other things that you listed down
Mm-hmm.
here. So how might we increase some of those things so that they can kind of also tap into those other
Mm-hmm.
things that are important to you?
Yeah, so I mean going back up to like the green stuff, right? So
Mm-hmm.
increasing um or setting aside chunks of time to spend with family and to spend in some of into that can feed that spiritual aspect, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, setting aside some time for your family to do particular things.
Mm-hmm.
That passes our dead person test, okay? Because a dead person cannot do that. Good. Interesting. Wonderful. Anything else you can think of that would fit in that box?
Not right now.
Okay. It's a pretty good list. You got a great set of things in all four of these quadrants, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so let's say I'm going to put in a circle here in the center. So it's not a
Mm-hmm.
circle. Here we go. I'm going to ask you a couple more questions, and then I'll write something down in the center of this circle.
Mm-hmm.
In your life as a person, who gets to choose? who and what are important to you.
Myself.
Yeah. And in your life as a person, who's the only one that can really notice the stuff on the inside of you that is showing up and interact with it, even when nobody else can tell that anything is going on with you?
Myself.
Yeah. And luckily for you as a person in your own life, who gets to control how you use your hands and your feet and your time and your energy?
Myself.
Yeah. So there's this big me there at the center of your life,
Hmm.
right? So there's a big you there at the center of your life that has the ability to choose who and what are important to you, the ability to notice and interact with the stuff that can show up on the inside that can be uncomfortable to feel. And then there's a you there that can choose how you use your hands, your feet, and interact with the world, right? So we actually have a lot more control over our lives than we tend to think that we do,
Mm.
especially when we get locked into one of those loops, that vicious cycle that you talked about earlier. When we're stuck in that vicious cycle, a lot of times it can feel like our life is sort of shrinking around us. It gets tighter or kind of harder to maneuver in that space. And we
Mhm.
can feel like we don't have much control at all over what's going on.
Yeah.
Um, and so usually when I do this matrix with clients, right, this is the point where I would say, perhaps we can make it one of our goals of working together to give you ways to add back in some of those elements of control so you feel like you
Hmm.
have some agency there, right? We can kind of destabilize that feedback loop that is occurring so that you can
Hmm.
do more of these types of things in the top right hand quadrant at your own choosing, right? Instead of just letting life sort of happen to you. Does
Hmm.
that make sense?
Sure.
So that's sort of the basic ACT matrix. That's kind of a quicker version maybe that I would do with a real client. But from there, we take this and then we start to do other work, using this sort of as a baseline. And we can always return to some of these things. For example, if we're doing 6 sessions in a row and it's all about, this one particular topic, uh, we can kind of say, hey, I also remember back when we first started together, you had this other set of values, other set of things that are really important to you. And I noticed we haven't even talked about those at all,
Hmm.
like in 2 months or 3 months. And I'm wondering where is that stuff for you, right? And so we can kind of see how all these pieces fit in together into a person's life.
Yes.
They're not just one of these quadrants or another. They're all
Mhm.
four of these quadrants in motion, in dynamic with each other
Yeah.
on a constant basis.
Hmm.
Okay. So what shows up for you? What do you think about this little exercise?
Yeah, I think it's powerful to see things written out and connect with them. I know if just from the trainings, right? ACT is very experiential.
Mm-hmm.
So it gets connecting a lot of this kind of cognitive piece and seeing it in a different way, just as verbal context, or going through your head and seeing it as kind of like, whoa, like there are some things, to notice here.
Yeah, it's funny because I ask clients that question. What did you think about this? The thing that we just did, and that's the number one comment that I get. The one that you just gave me, which is it's it's really powerful to see it written down and like notice these links of like how all these pieces are connected. That's the
Mm-hmm.
number one piece of kind of feedback that I've gotten over hundreds and hundreds of these that I've done with clients over the years. So
Hmm.
there is something to that, right? To writing it down on paper, noticing the connections and the links,
Yeah.
and then using that then as a tool to say how can I approach my life in this way or that way? How
Hmm.
can I notice these things showing up and then maybe intervene where otherwise I wouldn't even notice and I would just get pulled along by
Yeah.
something, right? This or that.
Right.
Wonderful. Okay. I'll
Hmm.
send you a screenshot of this for your own using later on.
Yeah, thank you
But that's
for.
basically Matrix. I just wanted to run that through you because I know you haven't experienced it
Hmm.
before. Well, let's see. We have a few more minutes, so maybe we can kind of start wrapping up here. But I want to give you a chance to plug, your website and any other thing that you're doing that you've got coming up, so that people can find you and connect with you. And if they're in Wisconsin or Colorado,
Yeah,
and
for
they're
sure.
looking for a therapist to maybe reach out to you for work. What do you
Yeah, no
think?
problem. Yeah, so or I am accepting new clients at this time. So we are only cash pay though, so no forms of insurance, and really focusing on helping men heal from those challenges of being a man in this society, right? Also trying to maybe you're trying to raise kids, maybe you're having challenges conceiving or infidelity,
Mm,
betrayal, trauma. I mean, there's lots of different things can happen when our stable sense of self gets rocked, right? Or even feels like it shatters. So thinking auto accidents, looking at PTSD for, police officers, EMS, military. Um, so really trying to help men not only heal but also step into better versions of themselves where they're kind of on the right side where those things are as we start healing things, right, the self-esteem starts to shift,
mm, hmm.
the self-worth starts to shift, how maybe you carry yourself begins to shift in a more positive light, not in a cocky or a haughty way, but your life begins to see these ripple effects where you're like, wow, like, I'm proud to be the one that's creating these changes.
Yeah, 100%. And even especially like during the pandemic when a lot of people were losing their jobs or going on furlough or whatever, um, that made a huge impact on people's mental health, especially for men, just knowing like, I don't have my job anymore. How am I going to support my family? There's real concerns there. That can be a traumatic experience in and of itself. As I'm
Yeah,
one
yeah,
paycheck away from losing my house, kind of a thing, you know?
the identity loss that can
Hmm.
happen, right? Or the perceived identity lost. Um, Also thinking like if people are very excited to have a child and
Hmm.
they don't anticipate that some children die.
Yeah.
So child loss is painful. Um, so really hitting those pieces, and then also sometimes we turn into adults and we've also been through some stuff as children, right? Our families aren't
Mm.
all perfect. So healing from whatever it was, physical abuse, sexual abuse, um, other forms of just neglect. So
Yeah. I'm wondering too, just before we disconnect here, do you ever get clients who their life on paper seems great? I mean, they've got it all. They've got a job, family, kids. They're, moving up the chain at work, promotions and stuff, but there's just something missing for them. They don't even know how to describe it.
hmm
You work with challenges like that as well?
I do, and it's interesting because again, it kind of ties back to our life moves so fast that our brain and our body often disconnect. Uh,
Hmm.
that can be a big one. Some of that may also not be living out our values to the fullest extent that we could be. Um, some of it can also be dissociation from childhood or earlier life trauma where we've just check out when
Hmm.
stressors come. Um, and a lot of that with EMDR and somatic experiencing is about slowing the body down and
Yeah.
starting to feel and how it's okay to feel, even though in our mind, and that's another piece that we would have to work on in therapy is sometimes the mind and the nervous system see feeling the body as its own threat because for so long
That's exactly right.
it's been the conduit of threat, right, from an external source. But I think a lot of people at times myself included, right, where we go about society and we think these external things are going to fill us up, fix the self-esteem, fix the self-worth. And in reality, it's that internal locus of control that needs to be fostered and shaped and again polished up.
Yeah, 100%. And basically, too, what you're saying here is that quality therapy includes what we call like a functional analysis. How is this functioning in your life, right? Because similar presentations can have different functions depending
Yeah.
on kind of the person in their life. And that's
hmm
why that's what people are paying for when they come to see a therapist, is that level of care. There's a difference between seeing a therapist and actually working things out versus getting a list of techniques. Just try this breathing technique and this other one, just kind of raw. There's no context there.
Right.
And so a lot of people have, I think, especially men, have maybe Googled some of these things and they're trying stuff out on an app or whatever. And it's like, I don't know if this is working. If that's you listening to this, probably reach out to Daniel and get some of that high quality functional analysis and care that he can provide at Revitalize Mental Health.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting you say that, right? Because a lot of people will show up and they're like, "Yeah, I think I'm depressed." And maybe they have some symptoms of depression, but really it's their their relationship is
Yeah.
not going well, or they're about to be walked off the job, or maybe it's their perception that they're going to be walked off the job, but in reality, they're doing a great job, right? And
Mm-hmm.
those things aren't aligned, but it's just causing like these huge amounts of distress and worry or anxiety, right? And so sometimes the diagnosis isn't even part of the equation.
Yes. Right. Yeah, exactly. Well, it
Mhm.
was a pleasure speaking with you, Daniel. Thank you for making time out of your day for me. If you want to connect with Daniel, you can check out his website. I'll link to it in the description.
Mhm.
And you can connect with him if you're in Wisconsin or Colorado. You can work with Daniel
Yes,
virtually or in person if you're in the Southeast Wisconsin area.
definitely. Thank you so much for this space, Jacob, and thank you for doing the ACT matrix with me too.
Hey, no problem. All right. Well, take care. Have a good rest of the day.
You too.